The George Floyd trial begins today. Derek Chauvin is being charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter, and already thousands of people are protesting in the streets. The city is setting up barricades, and police force is apparently preparing for this moment for some time. And everybody expects, no matter the outcome, there will be widespread riots throughout this city, Minneapolis. The interesting thing about this city is that, well, they voted to defund their police. They panicked. They tried bringing the cops back. Now they're doing some kind of multi-million-dollar recruitment drive, desperate to get their cops back. After they voted to get rid of the cops, people started complaining all over the city because crime and homicides were skyrocketing, and now they're desperate. But what's going to happen when these people come out to riot and the police force in this city has been crippled? Man, if you think the riots last year were bad, I think we expect them to get very, very bad, probably substantially worse. I mean, you got to realize when all of this went down with George Floyd, you had nationwide outrage because this man lost his life. And there was certain narratives going around. We'll get into all of this. Now you have to realize that when Derek Chauvin is found not guilty, and he very likely will be, and I'll explain why, they are going to be 10 times angry. Listen. The first riots were basically like, we demand these cops be arrested and charged. And they said, okay, and they did. But even after they did, people still rioted, burned down buildings, destroyed lives. What do you think's going to happen when the courts are like, not guilty, free to go? These people are going to erupt. So it's entirely possible that Chauvin is convicted for political reasons. It's hard to know exactly how things will play out. But based on the charges, second-degree murder and manslaughter, I believe publicly available information suggests he will not be found guilty. Now, if you're on the left for some reason watching my content, well, it's not me saying the dude didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying based on what's already been made publicly available, this guy's likely not going to get charged. What you need to understand about second-degree murder is that he had to have the intent to kill. For manslaughter, you need to prove that he did something, he was negligent that caused harm resulting in death. It's possible, in my opinion, that if this trial is played straight, right, like no politics involved, just here's the evidence, here's the jury, manslaughter is on the table. Second degree murder is not. They overcharged him. Maybe third degree. Manslaughter, maybe. The problem? The defense released images from Minneapolis police training showing them using the knee that Chauvin did. Now, you could argue, yeah, but just because you're trained to do it doesn't mean you do it for 9 minutes. But that still creates doubt. You see, you don't have to prove that Chauvin did anything wrong. You don't have to prove him innocent. That's not how court works. What's going to happen is the defense is going to say you need only a reasonable doubt. And now here's where it gets really bad for the prosecutors. There was an autopsy report that said, well, actually, I want to make sure I read this because I don't want people claiming it was me. From Business Insider, May 30th, 2020. George Floyd autopsy shows no sign of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. Attributes death to being restrained, his underlying health conditions, and any potential intoxicants in his system. It is true that he had a lot in his system. I believe he had a lot of fentanyl. He also had, I believe, meth, among other drugs in his system. Now, I believe the examiner did not conclude the death was the result solely of fentanyl overdose. Tucker Carlson recently did a segment where he said that's the real reason he died. No, that's not what the autopsy, the examiner said. But when you go to a jury and you simply say, look at what was in his system as per the medical examiner, that's reasonable doubt. So what you can expect? You can expect mass unrest. From ABC News, intimidation tactic. Advocates on edge amid stepped-up security for Derek Chauvin trial in George Floyd's death. They're apparently setting up big barricades. They say fortified fencing, barbed wire, concrete barricades have gone up around the courthouse and police stations in Minneapolis in preparation for the landmark murder trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin for the death of George Floyd. But what may seem like necessary preparations for unrest that could accompany the trial in a city still recovering from violence and destruction that erupted there last summer after Floyd's death, to others is a frustrating sign that government officials don't understand the source of tensions between police and community in the first place, aggressive police posture. Candace Montgomery, a local activist who helped organize protests over the killing of Floyd, said seeing taxpayer money allocated to ramping up security measures for a police department that she has supported defunding has been unsettling. She says, quote, as the people of Minneapolis and Minnesota are calling for justice and healing and care, state officials have been responding in some ways by basically preparing to go to war with folks. Interesting. She says, so I do think it's meant to be an intimidation tactic. Why are police setting up barricades? Thousands of protesters marched through Minneapolis to courthouse, where ex-cop Derek Chauvin'S trial over the death of George Floyd is set to begin. They say Derek Chauvin'S trial on charges of second-degree murder and manslaughter is slated to begin Monday. The white ex-cop is accused of killing George Floyd when he knelt on the black man's neck in an arrest in May. Minneapolis has been preparing for unrest for weeks, calling in up to 2,000 National Guard members. My friends, if your city is not preparing for this, they will regret it. When the George Floyd riots happened, the George Floyd riots swept across this country, okay? 19 people died directly as a result, and there was another, I believe, 12 to 14 who died peripherally, meaning like there are people who actually died in the riots, and there are people who died as a result of the riots. Giving the direct breakdown is more difficult. Like an example of someone who died directly in the riots is like they found one body in the burnt rubble of a building versus somebody who got like hit by a car while the riots were going on, things like that. So a lot of people have died. The original number they gave during the riots was like 31, but they lowered it because they didn't want the peripheral, whatever. It was bad for the press, I guess, so they changed the number. Whatever you think is the appropriate number is up to you. The point is, it's going to sweep the country. And at a time when homicides are skyrocketing, I think I might have this pulled up here. Check it out. Homicides, you can see right here in the pandemic and during just after the George Floyd riots, you can see that in the beginning of last year, homicides skyrocketed substantially. So you can see, I don't really know how to describe it to those that are listening on the podcast, but let me just say it is a hockey stick on a graph showing the line shooting straight up. This is a report that says criminal homicides are deliberate and unlawful killings of another human being. As with all offenses examined here, other than drug offenses, there is a clear cyclical pattern in homicide rates over time, with rates rising during the warmer summer months and falling during the winter. That said, homicide rates in 2020 exceeded previous rates throughout the entire year, and there was a structural break in the city average in June, indicating a large, statistically significant increase in rates after adjusting for seasonality and the longer-term trend. After this break, homicide rates increased sharply through July, then declined through the end of the year, though not to levels observed in the year prior, meaning they are still higher than they have been. And this is what we can expect. Derek Chauvin will likely not be convicted, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but let me break it down for you. Here's an article from May 30th, 2020. And also stress, like I said, we already have skyrocketing homicide rates, crippled police forces, and protests have already started, and they haven't even issued a ruling. They're doing jury selection. It's literally just starting. I'll tell you what, man, these protests they're scary. Because if the city fears the riots, then why would they choose justice? If Derek Chauvin is guilty, then so be it. If a jury trial finds him guilty, then so be it. But is it possible they just say, if we let this guy go, they'll burn down the country? So what do? That's the scary thing about politics. Let me read you the story from last year, and then I'll give you a breakdown of what's happening. They say George Floyd was non-responsive for nearly 3 minutes before Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin took his knee off his neck, according to a criminal complaint released on Friday. The complaint filed by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office also cited a preliminary autopsy report showing that there were no physical findings that support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. Instead, the report said that it was the combined effect of Floyd being restrained by the police, his underlying health conditions, and any potential intoxicants in his system likely contributed to his death. He died during an arrest, this we know. The complaint said that police are trained that this type of restraint with a subject in a prone position is inherently dangerous. That is fake news. This is the scary thing, my friends. The criminal complaint It's very strange to me, this whole thing. I think the riots really did result in this. So I'll say this to all the left-wing activists. Congratulations. Rioting and burning down the city really did work. But they said restraining the subject in a prone position is inherently dangerous. Okay, maybe because Floyd was unresponsive for 3 minutes and he didn't take his knee off his neck, you can argue manslaughter.